suggested that.
Hello everyone and welcome to Full Throttle, live on here on Unprecedented TV, in association with the Alliance of British Drivers. I'm Paul Naylor, ABD Director of Communications.
And I'm Gregory, Policy Director for the ABD. We're here fighting the good fight for freedom on the roads and beyond. Tonight we're expanding the focus of Full Throttle to look at the big economic and political battles shaping our world.
We are indeed. Our guest is Catherine McBride OBE. She's a top free market economist, trade and agricultural expert, former Trade and Agriculture Commission member, and was awarded her OBE for outstanding economic commentary. Catherine, it's great to have you on the show. Let's get stuck in.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Catherine, the big picture first. Where do you see the global economy heading right now? More free trade, protectionism, or something messier than that?
Unfortunately, I think on our side of the world, it's going to be pretty messy. I don't know if you've been watching what's happening in China. It's pretty interesting that 80 different industries went with Keir Starmer to go and meet Xi Jinping and all of the people there. The first news I saw of it was AstraZeneca are going to build an £11 billion facility in China, which is, not the way I think Keir was hoping that the investment would be coming in the other direction. I don't think he realised. And Astra was going to build two things in the UK, which they cancelled. And moved. One of them was a vaccine lab. I think they're moving that to the States. So we could be missing out a lot. If China and the US start to rattle their cages, then we're the ones who could be losing out on that one. We unfortunately have a lot. We're in a much better position than most of the other EU countries.
Yeah.
And yet we shot ourselves in the foot and decided to kill the industry we have that virtually no other European country does have. The oil and gas and coal are hugely important to industry, and we closed all that down. It's shocking. And to get onto cars for just a little bit, I'm not a car expert, but I do know quite a lot about trade. It is one of our biggest exports, along with plane engines, which I also noticed in your introduction. And ships. You've got them all.
Planes, trains, automobiles, anything, roller skates, if you like.
That's what we do. That's what we're good at. And not only have we closed down our oil and gas, but we've got this ridiculous ban on internal combustion engine, petrol and diesel cars, which we have moved forward for some reason that is beyond me. I don't know why we're doing it at all. We don't have the infrastructure to charge them. We can't make the batteries ourselves. We have to import the batteries from China. Yeah. And meanwhile, we perfected the ICE car. We make, you show all the Formula One cars in your intro. They're all based in the UK.
Yeah.
It's something we're really good at. Now, the only good thing about our stupid, sorry, I'm pretty abusive about a lot of things. So you'll hear some words you probably didn't learn.
No, it's fine. We won't beep anything.
Okay. Well, don't be too shocked. But yeah, when we had a loophole. So luckily, car companies that make less than 5,000 cars a year will not have to comply with the with the EV mandate. And that's great because I think Aston Martin and a few like that will just scrape through.
Yeah.
But it also will encourage them to lower their production. So in a world where people are getting richer, and with the trade agreement with India, where they could potentially sell more cars to Indian millionaires and billionaires, they won't be able to grow, because if they do grow, they're going to get hit by this EV mandate. So we've done some really silly things. And then a lot of people think the EU has pushed back its EV mandate, but it hasn't really. It's pushed it back from 35 to 40. So by 2040, they want all ICE cars gone. It'll all be EV. But in 2035, they're only going to allow 10% of the cars sold to be petrol or diesel. So in fact, it's not as good as a lot of people think.
Yeah, it's a phase out.
Yeah.
The only breath of good news I can see in that is with governments, once they start giving way, they show you that there's a crack. It's like letting your child stay up a little bit longer. They can see that you've just opened the door slightly, and they're going to get their foot.
Yeah,
exactly. And then they progressively drive the wedge further and further in.
Yes, yeah. And I think that car companies are such an important industry in the EU, especially in Germany, which is still the engine of the EU. That now that they can see that there is a little bit of leeway, they're going to keep pushing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The weird thing is, so maybe by 2040, it'll be the other way around. Only 10% of cars will have to be EVs, and all the rest will be else.
Yeah, that would be a more logical approach, actually, Catherine.
Would be a lot more logical, because the reason they're doing this is they're claiming this is to protect the EU industry. And you're going, no, the only way you protect the EU industry is to actually ban EVs. Because you discovered that China can make them so much more competitively than you can, because their market, their demand is so much more. It's not actually magic.
No, it's not. As you say, it's not rocket science. It's more common sense, but that seems to be a rather rare commodity in political circles at the moment.
Well, it is. It's shocking, but most of our politicians have never actually studied. They've never worked in a business. They've never run a business. Yeah. And if they have studied any economics, they've studied macroeconomics, which they feel is so much more important. But when you're running a country, in most cases, you really need to know about microeconomics. And a lot of that is common sense. We'll all know people who may have 1 O-level, but they run a very effective corner store. Because they know that the idea is to buy it for less and sell it for more. You don't have to be doing government bonds to work that out.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it? Napoleon said we're a nation of shopkeepers. Well, he missed that small businesses, but basically, shopkeepers and small businesses, and those are what really drive innovation and growth. And those are the very industries that this government, because of its crazy net zero policies, they're being driven into the ground. And the logic just escaped me, having spent 30 years in the chemical industry, having done a degree in chemistry.
Oh, wow.
So I cannot understand the logic, because from the very start, everybody's talking about man-made carbon dioxide emissions, but they're only about 3.5% of the total. The rest natural. We can't control them. So what's the point of trying to control 3.5%? Because you're not going to make any material difference.
Oh, it's completely. I'm on the same plane. I started studying science and was doing chemistry, mathematics, and I did some chemical engineering as well. Yeah. Then I swapped to economics and did a full science degree in economics in Sydney. It's not an arts degree, but it shocks me when I talk to people here of how little they understand the basic chemistry that runs our economy. They do not understand that oil is just not about petrol.
Well, no, there's about 6,000 essential products that absolutely drive our society forward. That if we don't refine and use hydrocarbons, they won't be available. Antibiotics, medical plastics in all of the things in our homes, in our cars, everywhere else, those will no longer be available.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's frightening. Yeah.
And it's also from gas. You know, the way we
absolutely.
make fertilizer. Most people don't understand that the reason we didn't all starve to death, as Paul Ehrlich and people in the 70s thought we would have all died out by 2000, was because we improved our crop production.
Yeah.
In my long life of trading commodities, I've done a lot of trading agricultural commodities.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that they, instead of getting more and more expensive and running out by the year 2000, they had never been cheaper. There was a glut of everything, even oil. You know?
Absolutely.
And that's the problem with people who extrapolate and convince government departments. They draw a nice line going up into the stratosphere. It's all going to be doomed, without realizing that, no, that's not how it works. People change. They look at that and go, oh, well, I can see a profit in that if I can find something that stops that happening. And of course they do. And then it doesn't happen.
No, it's very strange. But I mean, if we can come back to the financials of this, it's just been admitted by NESO, I think it was, that NetZero is going to cost about $4.5 trillion. And that's between now and 2050. That's not the biggest estimate. I've said the biggest one's from McKinsey, and they reckon it's going to cost 15 trillion.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that.
There's a McKinsey study that a while ago that said that, and that means like $500 billion a year for 30 years. Well, $500 billion is a sixth of our GDP, give or take. So that means everybody's going to be 16% worse off if you spread that cost across the whole country. That's just an absurd amount of money to splaff away when it's not going to make any material difference to the climate, but it will seriously crock our economy.
100%. There's an IEA paper came out written by a guy called Dave Turver, who I know quite well.
Yes.
We've had Dave on the program.
So he's not quite as high as 15, but he does make a very good case for how NESO have completely, they're using the very best case for all of their costs. And even now we know that all of those costs are completely wrong. So he's at the 7 or 8. And it is, and if the banks are right, and unfortunately they're probably right because that's their living, they're there to make money. They're there to exactly look for how much this is going to cost. We can't do it. The only good news about it getting to that cost is it's just too expensive. We can't do it.
But you only have to look at what's happened with HS2. I mean, that has just shot up in cost, and it's still nowhere near complete. And I expect the cost to rise even further. That should have been mothballed years ago.
And I used to work at the IEA, and they wrote a very good paper on that. Way back, I'm going to say before 2016, maybe. When HS2 was really just a figment of Adonis's imagination, and and the analyst was already working out that it was about 100 billion. He was looking at it going, there's no way they're building this for the amount they say. And the weird thing is, by starting from London to Birmingham, they've actually fixed the bit that wasn't broken.
Exactly, yeah.
And so we're not only spending a lot of money, we're spending a lot of money to get to Birmingham about 10 minutes quicker. And in fact, life has moved on from when Lord Adonis sort of came up with this. Because right now, when I take a train to Birmingham or Manchester or whatever, I've got a plug, I've got the internet, I always ask for a table. I can work as happily with my noise cancelling headphones on if there's someone in the room who's playing the music or something, ringing their wife to say they'll be late, whatever it is. I can work very effectively on a train. And I think when they started this project, it was in the days when you probably couldn't do that. So they did want to get there quicker. If you really wanted to make this a useful line, they probably should have started in Glasgow and come down. Connected everything. And then eventually not gone into Euston, come into St Pancras and gone on to Paris. They could have actually done something that people might have gone, that's a good idea. Let's go. from
But
Paris to Edinburgh. Why not? Or Glasgow or something,
Equally, if they hived off about half of the intended spend and put that into improving the quality of our motorways and increasing the coverage of motorways, because still 80 to 90% of the goods and services, the physical goods and services, are transported by road. Rail is a relatively small freight and passenger carrier in terms of vehicle miles. And when we're actually starving investment of the motorways, we're trying to put in these crazy smart motorways, which are extremely dangerous, as statistics have proved, even though the government's tried to hide that. We would be better spending it on a control program of the existing rail network and improving our motorways and our major A roads.
Yeah. But also the way the business is done these days. I mean, after the pandemic, well, during the pandemic and therefore after, the way that people do business has changed.
Yeah,
people no longer feel the need to get on a train and go to visit somewhere, where they could just easily do the business on Zoom or
as we are doing.
Yeah.
As we are doing right now, the number of Zoom meetings.
I wonder why Mr. Starmer's over in wherever he is now, because he could just as easily do a Zoom con with Xi Jinping or whatever he's called. I can't remember his name. As he could travel across there.
Yeah, Mr. Miliband
to send, offer his surrender document. Oh, here's British industry. Just
surrender document.
We'll watch.
If it's all true that the Chinese are listening to number 10, which I keep reading about at the moment, probably didn't even need to organise a Zoom call.
No,
about it 2 years
already. Certainly, Christopher Monckton, we had Christopher Monckton on about climate change, and Christopher Monckton, we must have him on because he's done this amazing study that was released in America about the extent to which our institutions have been infiltrated by Chinese sympathizers, shall I say, and we must get him on to talk about that because it's undoubtedly true.
Yeah.
And of course, we are the worse off because of that.
I'm not sure that you have to be a Chinese sympathizer. I think the Chinese are incredibly good businessmen, and they always have been.
Yes.
And this communist thing was a bit of a blip. And if they can see, they've all learned Sun Tzu's Art of War, if they can see that their enemy is making a mistake, they're not going to tell you, and they're going to profit from it.
Exactly.
They went a way to drive down the cost of solar panels. They put a lot of government money into perfecting it. Chinese solar panels are cheaper than Vietnamese solar panels, even though the cost of production in Vietnam is lower. They're cheaper than the US ones, even though the US invented a lot of this technology. And they did that on purpose. And
and built the kill switches in as well.
Well, it's not even the kills. Forget the kill switch. It's the subsidy switch that worries me.
Yeah.
These things do not make money on their own. I do know an Italian who invested in solar panels many years ago. And when I was suggesting that, he had them in Sicily and he was putting them in the UK. Yeah. And when I suggested that, how can the difference between those two in terms of sunlight, is enormous. And he said, it's not about how much the sunlight is, it's about how big the subsidies are. That's how they decide where they're investing. It's not about whether you've got sunlight.
Despite the fact that England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland and the Republic are the worst place in terms of latitude you could actually put solar farms because they're least efficient. We get very low levels of intensity radiation even in the summer, but of course virtually none in the winter when our power needs are greatest. It's just crazy. And as you say, look at who's making the money and where the subsidies are going, and you'll see why they're arriving here and why Miliband is carpeting the country with these things, apart from taking away loads of prime agricultural land to do it.
Well, of course, the easiest place to put solar panels is nice flat land. And that's the UK doesn't have a lot of agrarian land for crops. It's mainly all down the East Coast, which is fantastic, flat, large farms, farms that would be large in Australia, not just large in England. And they're the ones that the solar panel people are going after because it's cheap. Where all of that hill country in Wales, which could probably benefit from solar, subsidies, the hills are all facing the wrong way, and it's much more expensive to put the solar panels on, and so when they keep saying, oh, but the sheep can eat underneath the solar panel, and you're going, no, you're putting them on land that has never seen a sheep. You're putting them on land where we grow crops. So
exactly.
Stop the rubbish about the sheep. The sheep are in the hills on the Cotswolds and Wales. They're on the other side.
And then there's the chemicals leaching from those panels that probably wouldn't do the sheep any good if they did eat the grass anyway.
Well, I think they don't leach. I'm hoping they don't leach much in England. I don't think we get a lot of hailstorms, which they do get in Australia and desert places.
And the US as well. There was a video showing what had happened. I think it was Texas or somewhere. And it literally, the hailstorm had destroyed the entire, every single panel was shattered. And then that's a huge cleanup job.
It's a massive cleanup job. But we do, if you see the last few storms that have come across, a lot of trees come down. So if there are trees anywhere near the solar panels, which is probably another reason why they like the look of big flat fields that used to have tractors on them and there's no trees. That's probably why they like that. They don't have to worry much about tree branches.
Well, tractors need fuel, cars need fuel. One thing that we wanted to ask Catherine was fuel duty hikes. They keep coming. How badly are these squeezing drivers, and what's the sensible thing?
Well, I was interested to see that everyone for about over 10 years now have been saying, this thing they call a discount, which they mean they didn't keep putting fuel duty up with inflation, and they tell us that's a gift to us. That's a discount. And the Treasury even refers to it as a cost to them. It's like, it's not a cost. You invented this tax. They aren't going to put it up in April, which they had been talking about, but they will start putting it up in September, and then more of it will go up by next April, so April 27. And that is when they'll get rid of the 5p discount they've been so generous about giving us for the last years.
We have an ally called Howard Cox who runs Fairfuel UK, who's
all the best guys.
He's struggled manfully to keep that in place, and work done by the Centre for Economic and Business Research actually shows that fuel duty is a regressive tax, and the more you increase it, the more you dampen down economic growth. So the Treasury having the idea that actually increasing it is a good idea is, well, it's
a lot of them
it's sort of dream economics. It doesn't stand up.
They're heavily influenced by service industries. They're all based in London. They're probably, if they live outside London, they take the train in or the tube in. And then they get on one of those e-bikes, and they don't understand why we can't all do that. And we say, look, a truck delivering goods that has to go first from the farm to the processing plant, then after it's been washed and packaged, it goes somewhere else where it's chopped, and it's then packaged to the supermarket, and then it goes to the supermarkets. Then they have to distribute it everywhere. And then you lazy gits are ringing up on Ocado and ordering it. So then there's another group that have to deliver it. And it's like all of that stuff happens to get, food to someone's plate. And they don't understand that.
No.
I really think that it's some guy with a backpack and an electric bike is delivering it. I pull my hair out because it is a huge economic weight.
Absolutely, and even those goods that are delivered to a railhead by rail, it's a diesel lorry that takes it from there to wherever the end delivery point is. So you can't avoid using the roads at some point in the journey of that particular good, and especially with something like an AO fridge freezer. You're not going to carry that on an e-bike.
That also needs to run. The refrigerated lorry is using more power than a regular one.
Absolutely.
They don't seem to even understand that.
No.
Well,
all those oysters they eat in the restaurant in London, they don't realise that if somebody's trying to eat some in Grimsby, or, well, maybe not Grimsby because they can find their own oysters there, but sort of somewhere in Leeds or somewhere, that it's got to get there by refrigerated truck. End off.
Otherwise, it's a very big part of the economy, and traditional economics will teach you that as the price of fuel comes down, that's a boost to the economy. And right now, there's been a lot of fuel, was coming down, the fuel price. There's been a few political spikes when Trump sends the armada outside around, people start buying oil again. But apart from that, it was coming down quite a lot. And the idea that Venezuelan oil will be back on the market and stuff like that. So it was looking good for industry. But in the UK, because of the taxes we put on, not just fuel duty, but then we add VAT to not just the cost of the fuel, but also the cost of the fuel duty, which I think is almost rude. Why are you charging us VAT on a tax? That's outrageous.
Absolutely. It's bizarre. It defies explanation, really. What we're gonna? I mean, because of where we are now, because we're supposed to be post-Brexit. I mean, my personal opinion is that Brexit hasn't actually succeeded because the political will to make it succeed wasn't really there. So we're in sort of a no man's land at the minute. The government seems to be backtracking and actually trying to enmesh us more in European legislation again by the back door without actually admitting it. So where does that leave us, Catherine? We're in sort of in no man's land.
Well, I think that there will be a lot of lobbyists and companies that will be talking very severely to Keir Starmer and his friends at the moment, because we did do a lot on Brexit, but it wasn't to help the public. So a lot of civil servants, a lot of MPs, a lot of Conservative MPs wanted to give the appearance that we are still just like Europe. But a lot of companies, almost on day one, through what we call a statutory instrument, they changed a lot of the rules. For a long time, all the farmers were complaining about the 3-crop rule, which meant you had to grow 3 different crops if you had more than 30 hectares, which is not a very big farm.
No, it's not.
But a lot of European countries have smaller farms than that, surprisingly. So that a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries were not affected. But the UK had the biggest farms in Europe. So it hit pretty much all of our farms, had more than 30 hectares. And a 30-hectare farm is not a big farm, but they're suddenly having to grow 3 crops. That one changed the day we left, but most people didn't even know about it because it never got a lot of publicity. And if you were not a crop farmer, even sheep farmers in the country probably don't know about that. Dairy farmers probably don't know about that. So if you weren't one of the 100 or so people with large farms growing crops, you probably didn't know. In the city, we used to have a thing called off-market trading. If you're running a big hedge fund, you can't actually go into the market to sell down something you own because you own too much of it and you collapse the market. So you have to cross those trades off market, and they were called dark pool trading. God knows why. When I was working in the stock market, it used to be considered a crossing market, and it was all done off market. And a big seller would ring a broker, and a broker would run around and find a big buyer, and the crops, the things would be crossed off market. The French didn't like that, so they invented this crazy rule where if more than a certain percentage of the shares were traded this way, then it would stop, and you couldn't do any more like that for the rest of the year. So if more than 4% of the market cap of someone... Now, if it's a popular stock and a lot of people are piling in, big investment pension funds, investment funds, hedge funds are getting in, then you were getting a lot of these trades, and suddenly the UK had to stop. And it hit the FTSE almost the minute they bought it in. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Within the first quarter, it was done on a quarterly, how much you've traded. The FTSE got hit, or 80% of the FTSE shares were all suddenly unable to trade off market. And then it hit the Scandinavian ones as well, because they had quite big off-market trades. And it never worried the French or the Germans or any of those people. It was an EU rule designed to hurt the City of London. Now, that was changed on day one for UK stocks, And by the time the transition had finished, the transition period, they changed it for all stocks that were traded in London. Didn't have to worry about this silly rule. And there's a lot of that minutiae that was changed. And if we really went back into the EU, we'd have to go back again and put all those dumb rules back in.
Back in again.
Why the government is being very, very dodgy by saying, oh, we're just going to join a customs union, or we're just going to follow their rules without actually joining. So that means we're not going to change all of the rules that the big companies don't like, but we will follow this other stuff, which is really hurting the man in the street. Yeah. So the man in the street should have benefited a lot from Brexit when we started doing trade deals with countries like Australia and New Zealand. Australian beef is now about 80% or 100% cheaper than Irish beef. 30% of all the beef that's consumed in the UK comes from Ireland. Now, we have a trade deal with Australia. Why are we not importing Australian beef? There are two reasons for this. One is that we still have a limited quantity that we can bring in tariff-free, because they're only gradually allowing us to buy more Australian beef, and it will take 15 years from the trade deal coming into effect in 2023 before we'll be able to buy as much Australian beef as we can now presently buy from Ireland.
Yeah.
And that's assuming there's no change, if the population doesn't increase or whatever. So and also our supply chains are really controlled by EU companies. So the Irish own more than 50% of all of the abattoirs in the UK and what they call the meat processors. The really abattoirs. So that they are controlling it, and it's good for them if we have the same rules as the EU, because then it's really easy for them to
manipulate the market.
Yeah, and just...
But that was the whole point about that. I mean, when I was working with the EU, was supposed to clamp down on restrictive practices like this, and they used to have a unit called DG11, General Director 11, and the company I was working for made titanium pigments, and that was a worldwide market, and there was great scrutiny on titanium dioxide producers to make sure there wasn't any kind of cartel going on, and frequently people's head offices got raided and all the documentation got taken away to check that there was no collusion going on. And yet they're allowing stuff like this to go on, which is basically rigging the market, and it's counter free trade. Yeah, but it's counter free trade with somebody who's not an EU member.
Yeah.
And
it's still dodgy.
But it's not just the EU, because the UK's CMA, what is it, Commodities and Markets Authority?
CMA.
Companies and Markets Authority, who are to stop takeovers. They allowed a takeover between two Irish meat processing companies. One bought the other one. And that's where I got this figure of over 50%. They pointed it out. But it didn't stop them blocking the trade.
No producer can have more than a third of the total world market, because that was considered to be a monopolistic position.
I was going to say that should be for the Monopolies and Mergers Commission, surely.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, companies, Anyway, yes. So it seems very weird the way the EU operates.
And it is a shame, because we could have done a lot of good from Brexit and for the population. And instead, it's really the only people who've got any benefits have been large companies that were lobbying the government saying, here's a rule we want to change now. And the government usually did it. And for that general population who benefit more from imports that are cheaper than the ones we're getting from the EU, they got sort of locked out. No one wanted that. So, and meanwhile, when we did trade deals, like New Zealand dropped all of its tariffs, and it never had any quotas on UK goods. They dropped them all immediately. The moment that deal was signed, they were all gone. And Australia did it on everything except for 3 types of spring and 2 types of cheese. So they were survived. Otherwise, they just got rid of them all as well.
Yeah.
And the UK has like 14 pages for the Australian one, and probably even more for New Zealand, spelling out all of the structure of how they'll lower the quota. The tax-free quota will be introduced and increased, and it's, you just look at it and think that's ridiculous. This is a contract, but instead of, and then you'll read in the Daily Mail and wherever they like the National Farmers Union, people will say, "Oh, it was a really unfair trade deal." And you're going, if you read it, you'll understand it was an unfair trade deal, but the people it was unfair to were the people in New Zealand. But the British can't get their head around that. They are sure that they got ripped off by the dodgy New Zealanders. And you're going, no, New Zealand is a very honest place. They just make a good product. They just don't try and make everything. They make 9 things more efficiently than any country in the world. So tiny New Zealand is the world's biggest exporter of butter. And you see the things that they sell, you go, wow, how did they do that? When you look into it, it's like, well, they didn't try and produce everything. They tried to produce what they're good at. And that's used to be what the UK did.
Exactly.
When I came here, you'll like this, Brian, I came here in the 1980s, and the biggest company, or one of the biggest companies in the UK, was something called ICI.
Yes, which was my company was a subsidiary of ICI at the time. Yeah.
And you sit there going, this was a world beater. How do we let that just be broken up and shipped out? And now
I know, broken up piecemeal. The bit I was involved in was sold off to the Americans, the Huntsman, and then they changed its name to Venator, and then they started contracting, and the factory from which I worked, which is just up the northeast coast from me, is now being poured over by the Chinese, because Venator went into bankruptcy, Chapter 11 briefly, and as soon as they came out, snapped up by the Chinese.
Now, is that what were you making? Because someone told me about this today.
Titanium pigments.
Yeah.
So the white pigment that goes into paint, rubber, plastics, all sorts of stuff, pharmaceuticals even.
Well, I'm not sure if it was your company, but I'm writing a big paper with David Turver and another guy, Brian Monteith. It's effectively about the importance of oil and gas and coal in our whole economy. And, it's going beyond the idea. So many people are writing papers about electricity, and you sort of go, that's about 20% of our energy. It's all that other stuff you need to know about. Yes. But we came across this story where a company in the UK that made titanium oxide was driven out of business by cheap imports from China. And now the Chinese are buying it.
Yes, because it's that is the
company.
That was the one, wasn't it?
If you want the inside story, take it offline, and I'll.
I think we need to go into that in more detail, because that sort of stuff is something we really have to look at.
There were some really strange things that happened. Just for one, for example, we made a good grade for printing inks. It's very difficult to make good printing ink grades, and the only other one was made by, at the time, a Finnish producer. We bought the Finnish producer, so then we were in a monopolistic position. We were therefore forced to sell off our own recipe because the Finnish one was slightly better than ours, but now we had it. And then mysteriously, the Finnish factory burned down shortly afterwards. And we had sold our recipe to guess who? The Chinese.
Oh, no.
Yeah, honestly.
I mean, that's beyond that. I said earlier they're good businessmen, but I don't think that's good business. That's something.
No. I mean, it's alleged that it was an accidental, the fire, but they found that once the fire had happened, they couldn't rebuild the factory because it would be too expensive. So basically, they stopped production at the site in Finland, Pori, and then the company to whom we sold this ink recipe is called Billions, and Billions is the company that's just bought Venator, or what remains of Venator in the UK.
And do you think that the massive taxes we put onto oil and gas were part of that, and electricity?
Absolutely, because the way you make titanium dioxide, well, there's two routes. The old-fashioned route, which is basically you have a massive rotating kiln called calciner, and you put sort of small crystals of titanium dioxide at the top, and they come down to the bottom as the thing rotates, and the crystals grow to the size to make pigments. So you're using huge amounts of gas to keep that calciner above sort of 900 Celsius or something like that, as the stuff calciner discharge goes down to the bottom of the calciner. But the other route, it was very elegant. You make titanium tetrachloride, which is volatile. You distill the titanium tetrachloride to purify it, and then you reoxidize it back to titanium dioxide, and that uses huge amounts of energy because the reaction takes place in a magnetic plasma bottle, so you need a huge amount of power to maintain that magnetic bottle to actually make the pigment react in there. And of course, the factory at Greetham, which is the one the Chinese are acquiring, uses that technology.
Oh, wow. Because they'll also have very, very cheap subsidized power, or a lot of it.
Yeah, and of course, it was a huge amount, about a third of, somewhere a third, maybe a bit more nowadays of my ex-company's costs was just straight energy because of the process. So when energy costs here are 6 times what they are in the 4 times what they are in America, 6 times what they are in China, you're on a hide into nothing.
Yeah. And with the American one, I've done a lot of looking into that, and people like to say, oh, it's 4 times cheaper than us, but it's not. It's by state. The US energy is very competitive because each state is really doing its own energy. Yeah. So that average includes places like California, where it's very high.
Yeah, California or in New York State, where the crazies have got control. But in Texas, they have a bit more enlightened view.
Or Mississippi and places, Alabama, places that want to build up their industry have all realized they need to lower their energy costs. And they are working at that. And they're now, as many people will say, if we were a state in the United States, we would be the poorest in terms of GDP per capita. And that's one of the reasons, is that their industrial heartland is much cheaper than we are. We're just, so we're almost kidding ourselves when we're talking about that average. You're including.
We're not even hillbilly cousins.
No, well, exactly. Well, we could be. We could be.
We could do the Clampett thing and strike oil, but we'd choose not to.
Yes, we even know where it is. We know
exactly. And we're buying it at an on cost from the Norwegians because it's coming from the same field. You couldn't write it. You couldn't make it up.
We've actually got gas onshore. And I'm not talking about fracking. We have real gas onshore. They've discovered a massive field. And it's just there. We could all, the people there could be Jed Clampett, but they're not.
Absolutely. So you remember it's all Jed Clampett,
understand basic physics or chemistry or even economics, which you'd think So it's very shocking to me that we.
Well, it's basically a case of the lunatics being in control of the asylum, I'm afraid. That's what it amounts to.
It does. And there's no other way of explaining that.
Well, we know who the chief lunatic is because he's on the news all the time.
Telling us how cheap our energy is, and it's just your imagination that they want you to pay more.
I think he's had too much of the wacky backy or something, because his brain's definitely not on this planet; it's on a different one. It's crazy that they think. They believe very much in that sort of communist ideal, or maybe it was actually Goebbels who said you just keep telling the same lie. And exactly. Also Lüge, as the Germans call it. Yeah.
You just say a bigger lie and keep saying it over and over again.
People of Lüge.
That your energy bill is cheaper. It's £300 cheaper. Oh no, it's not. Oh,
exactly. It just defies explanation, really, and of course, so many people now are calling out on energy costs. As you say, Catherine Porter, David Turver, Ben Pyle, Andrew Montford from NetZero Watch. All these people are basically saying, you're telling us fibs, you know, and he just sticks to this same ideological mantra.
I think that it's not just them. It is not just those sort of guys that they're all fantastic and they're experts in their field, but the man in the street is noticing.
Oh, yes.
The single mother in, you know, East London is noticing.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole lot of people who would have maybe voted Labour are sitting there looking at their electricity bills going, hang on a minute, this isn't cheaper. This is more expensive. And this is getting more expensive again and again and again, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and the further we go into renewables territory, the more expensive it gets because of all the connections that you have to make to bring the power from where the renewables are generating it. And then there's the hydrocarbon footprint of the infrastructure that you have to put, the windmills, the turbines, all the rest of it, all of which came from hydrocarbons in the first place and couldn't be made without hydrocarbons. And then those are transferring the power, except when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, which is mainly in the winter when we need it most. And then we have to keep conventional backup as a backup for when the Dunkelflaute, as the Germans call it, as those periods arise. So wouldn't it be better to just get rid of all the renewable stuff and run our efficient, dispatchable, reliable nuclear combined cycle gas turbine technology efficiently and bring down the costs?
Yes, and use our own gas to do it. And
exactly.
And all of those new wells that we keep finding. It is something that I've, in researching this paper, I started looking into why newspaper reports keep talking about the Cambo site being controversial. And you realize that there's big activist groups that are well funded that have been just pushing this narrative in the press, and people believe it's controversial. And when you look into it, it's not controversial at all. It's just that they want it to be controversial.
Yes.
And one of these groups that has taken the government to court and slowed down the production of oil and gas to a point where our whole gas pipes don't have enough. The
infrastructure
they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And this group is incredibly well funded. They have 43 employees on their website. I was counting it the other day.
Yeah.
It's sort of going, I know really well-known think tanks in London working in Westminster, the IEA, the Taxpayers Alliance, the CBS. They don't have anywhere near that number of employees.
No.
You think, how can this tiny activist group have so many people working for them? Who's paying the bills? How are they taking the government to court? When the government has given permission for an oil well to be produced, why can some activist group going, oh no, this isn't any good, I'm taking you to court? It's kind of what's the point of the permission process?
No. But what I think should happen is that we should find out who's funding them, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's a few US billionaires with very sort of left-wing, if left-wing means anything nowadays, because I think far left and far right are somewhere up there in the totalitarian area, and the Overton window now is libertarian totalitarian, and it's these millionaires with strange worldviews who want to impose a world order from them down to the plebs, and that's probably where they 43 people are being funded from. So, I think there should be some kind of a legal investigation into that, and then expose just who these people are that are funding these groups.
Well, and also there's the element which we've already talked about with your former factory, your former employer.
Yeah.
Are they going to then, after they've run these businesses out of town, are they going to buy up the assets cheaply? Are they going to end up controlling all the energy because they've managed to hoodwink our hapless politicians into thinking that this should be kept in the ground? I really wonder, what is their game plan? Why would they want to do this? Or do they own the wind farms? They're making a fortune from subsidies. Or do they own the oil and gas in the US and they want us to keep buying that? They don't want us to have our own.
But it's a death sentence for industry in this country, Catherine. It's just spiraling down the plug hole as we watch.
It's not just that, but that it is that, and I'm writing a whole paper about it. But there's also a geopolitical element, because Trump has been very firm. The best way to get Russia to stop invading the Ukraine is to lower the oil and gas price. And invading Venezuela actually did a lot of that, which I don't think people were thinking about. Though invading Iran might push that back up again. But the fact that the UK is sitting on oil and gas that it could be selling to Germany right now and could have started from 2022. We could have, instead of putting this windfall tax on, which the Conservatives did, and it's one of the worst things anyone has ever done. And I will never forgive Rishi Sunak for doing that. He's a total idiot in my lunatic opinion. And he, at a time when the world desperately needed more gas, he decided to make it more expensive to make gas in the UK, claiming it was a windfall. And you're going, well, sorry, an invasion of a country is not a windfall.
No, absolutely
that is
not.
a time when you should be actually going to all the oil and gas people and saying, you will pump more right now.
Yeah, exactly. Turn the whistle. Yeah.
If it doesn't work for your, program of whatever works, we want more. In the same way that during the Second World War, they did go to companies that used to make, cars, and they suddenly said, you are now making tanks. Get on with it. Work it out. And so it's kind of, and same with during COVID, the perfume makers were suddenly making hand wash. Or,
exactly.
The government can do it. And why they decided at a time when we needed more oil and gas to close that down, I will never understand. Yeah.
And of course, the level of windfall tax now can be above 100%. Apparently, that basically it's not in the interests of the companies extracting oil and gas to take anything out, because they actually end up paying money to the government for product that they're not going to sell to anyone. That's just crazy.
Yeah, no, it is. And also most of them are large multinationals.
Yes.
People say to me, "Oh, well, it's BP and Shell. They don't matter," and you're going, no, they own oil wells all over the world, and they can bring out the oil of any other site and not pay this tax, because this tax is only on their North Sea production. It's not a tax on all of their income. It's their tax on North Sea. So, of course, they're going to leave. They're not going to bother. Why? Yeah. It's not funny. To run an oil rig is an expensive process. You're not going to go, oh, yeah, we'll just keep pumping away.
Exactly. It flies in the face of economic sense, as you say, and so they react accordingly. But drive all of the downstream activities, all of the refining activities, and all of the chemicals that come from the refining activities, and all of the activities of those companies. All of those then start contracting at a dreadful rate, and with no sign of any replacement industry, because they can talk about renewable jobs, but I think every renewable job, I think David Turver worked out that every renewable job costs about £1 million a year. Crazy numbers, and so you're not going to make a lot of jobs at those sort of costs.
But also, they're not really. Some of them are not permanent jobs. So when they build there's a lot of work in building a turbine or putting in a wind farm, but also they're including in the renewable jobs is turning putting as a smart meter into your electricity system. So that's considered a green job. And you're going, well, I don't think that's really very green, because that's just, the guy changing the meter in your house. And again, like a lot of it, once that's changed, you're not going to keep changing it. It's a one-off thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's not an ongoing.
So it's not really green. Most of the green jobs are in China, making either the solar panels or the steel, which we are using to make the what do you call it? the arm of the turbine, and also the mechanism in it. I love watching them making them. The fast forward on the internet, the pouring of the cement that goes into.
Yeah, exactly.
Luckily, the UK still makes about 60% of the cement it uses, so that we are still making that. But we've got one thing we haven't touched on, which is we could do before this ends. Now Paul's back.
Can I just apologise? I don't know what happened there. My webcam just suddenly switched off. I've been trying to get it back. And it came back as just a wall. So you were talking to the wall. I'm back. I'm back. So anyway.
Welcome.
Now, I was impressed. You were really looking very studious when then I realised, no, he's actually not there. But,
sorry, Catherine, you were going to say the one last thing.
Well, yes, in terms of the cost of electricity, the government is planning to rejoin the EU's ETS scheme, which is when you have to buy emissions allowances. So all companies at the end of the year have to submit their allowances for the CO2 they've produced. And they have to buy these on the market unless they're an energy intensive industry, and then they get them free, which is another issue. We won't go there. But our government decided, because we are not very industrial, we've always had a much cheaper ETS than the EU. So when we left, we set up our own ETS, and our ETS price was much lower than the EU's price. And part of that deal was because we also had a thing called the CPS, which is the carbon, the CPS? Carbon protection support or something like that. Right. And so that added another sort of £8 per megawatt or whatever. So between the two of them, our costs were already about the same as the EU's. But now that we're joining the EU scheme, our ETS is going up to meet the EU's. So our costs, our electricity will be more expensive because the CPS was introduced to drive coal-fired power stations out of the grid. And they've all been driven out of the grid. The last coal-fired power station closed last year. But like all taxes, the government never got rid of this tax. So our electricity will be more expensive than the EU's. And then they want us to join their, what they call carbon border adjustment mechanism, which everyone refers to as a CBAM. But it's only being charged at the moment on 6 goods, and they are not really important to the UK production cycle. One of them is iron and steel. Now, we all know what a debacle that's been. We've only got 2 blast furnaces left. And they're only still going because the UK government's spending about £7 million a day to keep them going.
Propping it up,
If you want to work out the cost per job, that's enormous. And aluminium, we stopped producing aluminium many years ago because of their emissions. We only have 1 aluminium smelter left, but it's in Scotland and it runs on hydropower. So it in fact has 0 emissions. So that doesn't need protection from the EU CBAM. Then they've also got, they're putting a CBAM on hydrogen. Well, we make very little hydrogen. We don't really export it. We import it from the EU. We are building quite a few facilities to make hydrogen in the UK. I don't know if they're ever going to come to fruition, but there are plans to do that. So we don't need protection on that. Fertilizer, same deal. It'd be nice if we made our own fertilizer. Then I'd welcome a CBAM to protect our fertilizer industry. But as that also went out the window when we put all these extra costs on oil and gas, you go through the list, and it just makes no sense that we would join that now. Because the EU, the main imports that are driving our businesses out of business are in fact the next level of good. It's not that basic steel, aluminium, your fertilizer. That's not where we're at. We're getting undercut by the next level when someone turns that into a chemical or makes that steel into a car or makes that aluminium into a plane or a plane part, wing. That is the level where we need protection, but the EU CBAM, in all its wisdom, doesn't do that.
Yeah.
And it's now closing the gate where the horse is bolted, because most of those industries have already moved out.
Yeah.
And now it's going to...
Well, one of the ones you just mentioned, apart from pigments, we used to supply to IMI Titanium, which was in the Midlands. And they made titanium parts for aircraft and all sorts of other applications. I don't know if they even still exist now, because it's a number of years since I was involved. But they were their titanium was sought after worldwide because it was so pure, and they had such stringent testing. They used to put a certain amount of titanium dioxide into it, and it improved the strength, but they had to be careful there wasn't stuff like tungsten in there, because that acts as a locus for fracture. So, if you get turbine blades, titanium turbine blades, and there's any tungsten contamination, it just acts like a sieve from which metal fatigue emanates. So we had to jump through big hoops to make sure that the pigment we provided was very, very pure, had no contamination from tungsten and other transition metals. So they would be a prime example where it's an industry that supplies the world, because it supplies Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, all these other guys. But I don't know where that would fit into the CBAM structure. It should be a protected industry, because it's strategic, really.
Yeah, no, well, that's, and we were, the Conservatives did propose putting our own CBAM in place. And though it wouldn't have protected that was going to protect ceramics and glass, which are two things that the UK is very good at making.
Yes.
And they use a huge amount of energy. So that would have maybe been fair to put a tax on imports from China of ceramics and glass.
Yes.
But now we're joining the EU's one. That's not going to be protected. Instead, we're going to protect Germany's aluminium producing and Germany's steel production, even though Germany does not have any bauxite. So it has no axe to grind in aluminium production, and it has no iron ore either. It's like, why is Germany making the aluminium and the steel for Europe when it's getting the iron ore from Sweden and the bauxite from Australia or Africa? It's ridiculous. And
because the Krupp or whoever it is has been there for eons, since before the First World War, and they want to keep it there.
Yeah, presumably. But then now they don't even have energy either. It used to maybe make sense when they had a lot of Russian gas, but they don't even have that. So they're burning lignite to get power, and they're importing the raw materials. So, I mean, in a lot of things, the heavier raw material was the power. So Wales used to be the world's supplier of copper. And as you say, really fine copper, even though it had no copper ore, but it needed a huge amount of coal to refine the copper. So they'd import the more valuable thing, which is the copper ore. Yeah. And you don't import the cheaper thing you're going to use a hell of a lot of, which is the coal. So that, and instead we managed to lose that as well, I
know.
There's one coal mine left in the UK, and it's making anthracite, which is very pure, clean burning, high temperature coal, which is great. So we've still got something. But you think, wow, to go from being the world's major producer of copper, which is the most important thing right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Everyone likes talking about, we'll do AI and data centers, and all be wonderful. And you're going, well, no, you won't, because you won't have any electricity. And B, you won't even have the copper wire. And
I think silver as well is another element which is used in, and that also we don't have any control over.
Yeah. And speaking of tungsten, I hear that the UK has a lot of tungsten, but still in the ground. It's where we like to keep it. We keep our treasure. We're buried treasure kind of people. That's what we are. We're just like pirates.
The pirates of Europe. Fantastic.
Yeah. It's very
Well, Catherine, it's been brilliant having you on. We've got so much to talk about. I think we're going to have to get you on again at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd happily come back. It's just like talking to old friends.
Hopefully, I'll stay for the whole show next time. You just don't know.
You never know.
No unscripted sort of departures and returns. Okay, well, all right. Catherine, thanks so much. We will definitely invite you back because it's been really interesting. I'm sure we can continue digging into this with other quite insightful questions.
I will pick your brains for this paper because
I was going to say,
we have literally written about your company.
Okay. Please do come back to me.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say that we've had to write about it, but it is terrifying that could happen. And anyhow.
Very
but that is the environment in which we're living. We're as I said, we're seeing the slow motion collapse of our industrial base, and anybody who thinks that's a good idea is frankly out of their tree. Really, we need somebody at high level to take these people aside and tell them that they're mad, and then read them the Riot Act and say either fix this or depart. Yeah,
well, they think that a dealing room runs without electricity. And you're going, no, the whole dealing room in every bank in London cannot afford to have even a second blackout. They would lose billions in that second. They would all have backup generators. I go down to South Africa once a year, and we've watched when their blackout started a few years ago. At first, everything closes, all the restaurants are closed, people are standing around on the street waiting for things to open again. And then they could go back inside. Now, 8 years later, you don't know, there's a flick of the light switch, and that means the generators kicked in and the electricity's gone off. Every business, every restaurant, every hotel.
Backup diesel generator.
Yes. We've gone back to the real power. No
exactly. Hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons.
And that's where it's at.
And that will be
an interesting graph, which we'll come back to in another episode, but basically it shows there are no high energy cost, highly profitable, high growth nations. All of the ones with the highest energy costs at the bottom of the pile, and the ones with low energy costs are the ones that have high growth rates, high employment, and are prospering.
But I tell you, if Ed keeps going on this way, every bank in the City of London will have a backup diesel generator. Everyone, probably one on every floor.
Well, but I think if he achieves his aspiration, we'll all be going back to wearing skins and living in caves.
Or we'll all be going to live in Dubai.
Which
is the weirdest thing possible.
Which is where my son lives at the moment. So there you go.
Okay.
We can leave it there,
He's probably scouting for property for you, Paul.
Yeah, that's what he is. He's scouting. Catherine, thank you ever so much, and we'll speak to you again.
Thanks, Catherine. Absolutely. We will see you again soon. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.